Hey guys. Okay, today we're going to be talking about direct variations, and direct variations are just linear equations. They are special linear equations, and the reason that they are special is because it's going to be any linear equation that goes through the origin. So any line that goes straight through the origin, we know that it varies directly, or it's a direct variation. Okay, the general equation for a direct variation is y equals kx. Guys, this k represents your slope. It's just, instead of calling it m, it gives it a special letter. So we have a special letter for slope, only because it's a special line that goes through the origin. Okay, the graph of a direct variation always goes through the origin, which is the point 0, 0. All right, anytime that we have direct variations, they're proportional, so we're going to set a proportion. So some of you might have heard it called as the butterfly. Some of you might have heard it called as bat and ball, I've heard. So we're going to set up a proportion. I call it cross multiply. Okay, so it varies directly. It's telling me I can set up a proportion. So it gives me a y value and it gives me an x value. So really that's just a point. Remember, as a point, the x value comes first and then the y. It's telling me to find y when x is 36. So I'm trying to find this guy right here. Okay, so when you set up a proportion, it doesn't matter what goes on top or what goes on bottom. I'm going to put my y's on top and I'm going to put my x on bottom, and I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so it gives me that y is 1/2 when x is 3. So this y, we said y's go on top, the x's go on bottom. The next part tells me to find y, so I don't know the other y, so I'm going to call it y. When the x's go on bottom, so that 36 goes on bottom. All right, now what I'm going to do is something called cross multiply. So I'm going to go diagonally. I'm going to take this 3 and this y and multiply them together. 3 times y is 3y. Okay, this is where I have a lot of students mess up. You go diagonally, then you make it equal, and you multiply the other diagonal. So I'm going to take 1/2 and I'm going to multiply it by 36. 1/2 times 36 is 18. So now all I have to do is solve for y. So I look on the side that has y, I need to get rid of that 3. It's touching it, so I divide. 3 on top cancels the 3 on bottom, so y drops down. Y equals 18 divided by 3 is 6. So the point they gave me was 3, 1/2. They gave me the x of the second point, and I found the y to be 6. Okay, it wants me to write the equation, the direct variation equation, which remember is y equals kx. Well, an easy way to find k is to take the y of a point and divide it by the x. So it doesn't matter which point you use. I'm going to use this point right here, just because I don't like fractions. So I'm going to take the y of that, which is the 6, and I'm going to divide it by the x, which is the 36. 6 divided by 36 is 1/6. So that's my k. That's this guy. So to write my equation, I'm going to have y equals, we just found k is 1/6 x. So one more time, y equals kx. It's easy to find k whenever it's a direct variation, because you just take a point, take the y from that point, divide it by the x. I use this point. So the 6 divided by the 36 gives me 1/6, so that's my k value. All right, let's try another one. All right, so I see that it tells me it varies directly. Gives me that y is 2/3 when x is 12, so I'm gonna write that as a coordinate. So the x is 12, the y is 2/3. It goes on to say find x, so I don't know x, when the y is 24. So I don't know this guy, so we're going to set up a proportion. Okay, so remember, it doesn't matter what goes on top or bottom. I like to put y's on top, x's on bottom. So y is 2/3, so that goes on top. When x is 12, so that goes on bottom. It tells me to find x, so we don't know x, when y is 24. All right, so then what I do is I cross multiply. So I go diagonally. 12 times 24 is 288. Then we set it equal. And then I go diagonally the other way. So I'm going to take 2/3 and multiply it by x. 2/3 times x is 2/3x. All right, so then we solve for x. Well, if I want x by itself, I have to get rid of this fraction. Remember, to get rid of a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, the reflipical, we flip it, so 3/2. What I do on one side, I have to do the same thing on the other. 3/2 times 288 gives me 432. On the other side, the fraction and the reciprocal cancel, so x falls down. I'm going to need bigger space here. All right, so we're going to write our direct variation equation. So y equals kx. Remember, k can be found by taking any point on that equation and taking the y of that point and dividing it by the x. So it does not matter which point we use. So we have 2 points up here, the point they give us and then the point that we help find. I don't like fractions, so I'm going to use this guy right here. So I'm going to take the y, which is 24, and divide it by its x, which is 432. And I'm going to simplify that. 24 divided by 432 simplifies to 1/18. So that is my k. So now I have everything to write the equation. Y equals 1/18x. Okay, example 3. It tells me that it varies directly, so I know I can set up a proportion if need be. It gives me that y is -9 when x is -3. So I'm going to write that as a point. The x comes first and then the y. It tells me to find x, so I don't know this first guy, when the y is 18. So this is the point it gave me. It gave me the y of my other point, so we're going to set up a proportion to find this guy. So remember, it does not matter what you put on top or bottom. I'm going to put y on top, x is on bottom. Okay, it gave me, my y is -9, so I put that on top. The x that went with that is -3, so I put that on bottom. Gave me y is 18, so my y goes on top. We don't know the x. Okay, so then we cross multiply. So diagonally, I'm going to take -3 and multiply it by 18. -3 times 18 gives me a -54. Then put your equal sign and go the other way. The other diagonal is -9 times x, which is -9x. So then we have to solve. So to get x by itself, I get rid of that -9. It's touching, which means multiply. The opposite of multiply is to divide. -54 divided by a -9 is a +6. So we know that when y was 18, our x was 6. I don't. Thank you, guys. Okay, so all we have left is to write our equation. Y equals kx. So remember, to find k, we could take any point, take the y and divide it by the x. It doesn't matter which point we use. So I can use the point. How about we use the one that gave us this time? So let's use this guy. Okay, so we're going to take the y, which is -9, and divide it by its x, which is this -3, and simplify. -9 divided by a -3 is a +3. So that's my k. So now we have what we need to write the equation. Y equals 3x. Okay, so now let's try some of these as word problems. It says in an electrical circuit, the voltage across a resistor is directly proportional, so I see that directly proportional, to the current running through the resistors. If a current of 12 amps produces 480 volts, write an equation to describe the situation and then determine how many volts a current of 15 amps produce. Okay. So guys, above at the very top, I want you to write that y varies with x. So the y is going to vary with the x. So the voltage y is going to be directly proportional to the current, which will be x. So the y varies with the x. The y is proportional to the x. Okay, that's going to come in handy in a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and set up our proportion. We have amps over, I'm going to put volts on bottom. Like I said, it doesn't matter. Whatever you decide to do, just stay consistent. So I put amps on top, volts on bottom. Does not matter as long as you stay consistent. Okay, so let's look at what it gave me to start with. Okay, 12 amps. So that 12 goes on top. So 12 amps goes with 480 volts. All right, the next part, it gave me 1.5 amps. So amps goes on top. I'm trying to determine volts, so I'm going to call it V, V for volt. All right, so now I'm going to cross multiply. So diagonally, I'm going to take 480 and multiply it by 1.5. That's going to give me 720. And then I'm going to go diagonally the other way. 12 times V is 12V. So now it's just a solving game. I need to get rid of that 12 by dividing by 12 on both sides. 720 divided by 12 is 60. So I know that if it produces 1.5 amps, it's going to be 60 volts. Okay, the amount of chlorine needed for a swimming pool varies directly with the amount of water needed to fill the pool. If 16 units of chlorine, so 16 units of chlorine are needed for 1,250 gallons of water. And it goes on to say, for your equation, use your equation to determine the amount of chlorine needed for a 20,000 gallon pool. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what goes on top and bottom. I know we're talking about chlorine, so I'm going to put chlorine on top. And we're going to put gallons of water on bottom. Okay, let's start what it gave me. It told me 16 units of chlorine. So 16 units of chlorine goes with 1,250 gallons of water. Next, it gave me 20,000 gallons. So that's going to go on the bottom. And we don't know how much chlorine goes with that. That's what we're about to solve for, so I'm going to call that C. All right, and then we cross multiply. So I'm going to take that 1250 and multiply it by C. That gives me 1250C. Don't forget to put your equal sign. And then we're going to multiply the other way around. I'm going to have to move this guy. Now I'm going to take 16 and multiply it by 20,000. And that's going to give me 320,000. So to solve, I need to get rid of that 1250. So I'm going to divide both sides. 1250 on top cancels the one on bottom, so C drops down. $320,000 divided by 1,250 comes out to be 220,000. oops, 256, and it was talking about units of chlorine. All right, so if we want a 20,000 gallon pool, I'm going to have 256 units of chlorine. Let's keep it going. Okay, it tells me the mass of a varied substance directly with the volume of the substance. The volume of 100 kilograms is 80 liters. It tells me determine the volume in liters of 5 kilograms. Okay, remember, it doesn't matter what goes on top or bottom. I'm going to put kilograms on top. I'm going to put liters on bottom. And I'm going to set up my proportion. Okay, well, it tells me 100 kilograms go with 80 liters. So 100 kilograms, 80 liters. Goes on to tell me 5 kilograms. So kilograms goes on top. And we're trying to figure out liters. So let's call that X. I don't like using an L because it might look like a 1. And now we need to cross multiply. So I'm going to take 80 and multiply by 5. 80 times 5 is 400. Don't forget to put your equal. And then multiply diagonally the other way. So 100 times X is 100X. So now I solved. I need to get rid of that 100 by dividing both sides by 100. 400 divided by 100 is 4. On the other side, my hundreds cancel, so X falls down. So I know that 5 kilograms of the substance will be 4 liters. Oh, okay, so we need to write our direct variation equation. This is what I was talking about earlier about the y varies with x. We need to figure out which one is x and which one is y. Okay, so y varies with x. Let's write that again, because I kind of forgot on the other ones. Okay, so it tells me the mass varies with the volume. So mass is my y, volume is the x. So mass is your kilograms, that's your y. Your volume is your liters, that's your x. We have room, we can write it down here. Okay. All right, so I know I need a point, so let's take the point that it gave us. 100 kilograms goes with 80 liters. Okay, so X is liters, so that's the number that goes first. So 80 liters, so the point would be 80, comma. My Y is kilograms, so 80 liters went with 100 kilograms, so the 100 is your Y value. Okay, so remember to find K. We're going to take our y and divide it by our x. Well, our y is 100, so the y from this point is 100. We're going to divide it by our x, which is 80. And simplify. 100 divided by 80 simplified, it's going to give me a 5 over 4. So we just calculated K. Remember to find K, you take a point. We know that 80 liters went with 100 kilograms. So we took the y, we divided it by the x. 100 divided by 80 simplifies to 5 over 4. So now we have what we need to write our equation. Y equals 5 over 4 x. Later, guys.